The gravel crunched under my tires, a sound that usually signaled the start of a comforting weekend visit, but today it felt like the prelude to a funeral. I turned the engine off and just sat there, staring through the windshield at the unfamiliar sedan parked in the driveway where my father's truck had sat for 30 years. Silence. It was October 2019. The leaves were already turning that deep, bruised purple that signals the end of autumn in Vermont, and the house, my house, or so I thought, looked different. The shutters had been painted a jarring shade of blue that my mother would have called garish if she were still the woman I thought I knew, and there were boxes stacked high on the porch. So I got out. I walked up the steps, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs, expecting to see my dad open the door with a confused grin, asking why I hadn't called first. Instead, a man I'd never seen before opened the door, holding a roll of packing tape and looking mildly annoyed at the interruption. He was tall, maybe 60, with the kind of tired eyes you get after moving furniture all day. "Can I help you?" he asked. I blinked, trying to make the world make sense again, because surely I had taken a wrong turn or woken up in a different timeline. "I'm sorry, is this the Vance residence?" He shook his head, peeling a strip of tape off the roll with a loud, tearing sound that made me flinch. "Not anymore. Closed on it Tuesday. I'm David." Tuesday. My parents had been at my apartment for dinner on Sunday. They didn't say a word. They had eaten my roast chicken, complained about the traffic, and asked when I was going to get a promotion, all while knowing they had just sold my childhood home out from under me. I felt the blood drain from my face, leaving me lightheaded and cold, as if the winter wind had cut right through my coat. "I'm Sarah," I managed to choke out, forcing a polite smile that felt like it was going to crack my face. "Sarah Vance. I'm their daughter." David stopped. He looked at the tape in his hand, then back at me, his expression shifting from annoyance to something sharper, more curious. He leaned against the doorframe, crossing his arms over his chest, and studied me for a long, uncomfortable moment. "Vance," he repeated, dragging the name out. "Yeah, that's interesting," he said, and he wasn't smiling anymore. "Because when we were going through the final walkthrough with the title company, there was a bit of a hiccup regarding a specific clause on the original deed from 1998. The lawyer mentioned a Sarah had to sign off on any transfer of ownership." My stomach dropped. I stared at him, the world tilting on its axis, because I had never signed anything, never even seen a deed, and certainly never been asked for permission. "I didn't sign anything," I whispered, barely loud enough to be heard over the rustling leaves. "I know," David said. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, worn at the edges, and for a second, I thought he was going to hand it to me. But he didn't. He just held it, tapping it against his thigh. "Your folks," he started, choosing his words carefully. "They told the title company you were incapacitated, said you were in a facility upstate, and that they had power of attorney." The lie was so big, so audacious, that I couldn't even process the anger yet. I was just stunned by the sheer mechanics of it. They had erased me. To sell a house that my grandmother had built, a house she had whispered would always be my safety net, they had legally declared me incompetent. "I'm a librarian," I said stupidly. David let out a short, dry laugh. "You look pretty lucid to me, Sarah." "I am." He nodded, looking back at the boxes on the porch. Then he did something that changed the trajectory of my entire life. He stepped back and waved me inside. "Come in," he said. "There's a box in the attic they left behind. Said it was trash. I think you should see it." I shouldn't have gone in. Everything in me screamed to run, to get back in my car and drive until the gas ran out. But the pull of that house was stronger than my fear. I stepped over the threshold, the smell of fresh paint warring with the old, familiar scent of cedar and dust that lived in the floorboards. The house was empty now, stripped of the furniture I grew up with, the walls bare of the family photos that had always made me feel like an outsider in my own life. It was hollow. David led me to the kitchen where a single cardboard box sat on the counter, marked "office junk" in my mother's jagged handwriting. He didn't open it for me. He just went to the fridge, pulled out a bottle of water, and set it down next to the box. "I bought this place fair and square," David said, his voice level. "And I don't intend to lose it, but I don't like liars." "Neither do I." "Good." He took a sip of water, watching me with those sharp, intelligent eyes. "If they forged your signature or lied about your status, that's fraud. But if I report it, I get tied up in court for years, and I just want to retire." "I understand," I said. "Do you?" He leaned in close. "Because if you want to fix this, you can't just go screaming at them. You scream, they win. They'll say you're unstable, just like they told the lawyers." He was right. My brother Kyle was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, while I was always sensitive Sarah, the one who overreacted. If I stormed over there now, demanding answers, they would just gaslight me until I doubted my own name. I needed proof. I looked at the box. "What's in there?" I asked. "Old papers," David said, shrugging. "Receipts, and a blue envelope that was taped to the back of a filing cabinet drawer. I found it when we were moving the heavy stuff." A blue envelope. My grandmother used blue stationery. Always. She had died in 2005, leaving a hole in my life that my parents had quickly filled with their own ambitions and spending habits. She had told me the last time I saw her in this very kitchen that she had taken care of things. I reached for the box. "Take it," David said. "And Sarah?" "Yes?" "My nephew is a forensic accountant in Boston. If you find what I think you're going to find, give him a call. I wrote his number on the flap." I looked at him, really looked at him, trying to understand why a stranger would hand me a loaded gun. "Why are you helping me?" "Because," he said, looking around the empty kitchen, "my brother screwed me out of my inheritance in '92. I didn't fight back then. I regret it." He didn't say anything else. He didn't have to. I took the box, thanked him, and walked back to my car, my legs feeling like they were made of lead. I didn't open the box in the driveway. I didn't even look at the blue envelope until I was 3 towns over, parked in the back of a diner lot with the doors locked. When I finally tore it open, the date at the top made my breath hitch. November 14th, 2004. It wasn't just a letter. It was a copy of a trust that named me as the sole beneficiary of the property upon my 25th birthday. I was 29. They had been sitting on this for 4 years. They had lived in my house, rent-free, while I struggled to pay off student loans. They had sold my house, likely to pay off Kyle's gambling debts or fund his latest failed startup, and they had declared me mentally unfit to do it. The betrayal was so absolute, so comprehensive, that I didn't cry. Tears are for sadness. This was something else entirely. It was a cold, hard clarity that settled in my chest, replacing the confusion. I looked at the number David had scrawled on the cardboard flap. Robert, 6175550-198. My phone buzzed. It was my mother. "Sarah, honey, are you still coming for Dad's birthday dinner next week? We decided to book that Italian place you like. Kyle is bringing his new girlfriend." I stared at the screen. The cheerful, oblivious tone, the casual mention of the Italian place I liked, which was actually the cheapest option in town. The seamless inclusion of Kyle. They thought they had gotten away with it. They thought I was just Sarah, quiet Sarah, who would never question why her parents moved to a luxury condo so suddenly. They thought I was safe. I typed back, my fingers steady. "Wouldn't miss it for the world. Can't wait to see everyone." I put the phone down. Then I picked up the blue envelope and the number for the accountant. The war had started, and they didn't even know it. I didn't go back to my apartment that night. I couldn't face the quiet walls or the stack of unpaid bills on my counter, knowing that my financial struggle had been manufactured by the people who were supposed to protect me. Instead, I drove straight to Boston, fueled by lukewarm gas station coffee and a rage so cold it made my hands shake on the steering wheel. It was raining. The wipers slapped back and forth, counting down the miles, while my mind replayed every interaction I'd had with my parents over the last decade. Every single one. The guilt trips when I couldn't afford to fly home for holidays. The way my mother sighed when I told her I was taking extra shifts at the library. The loans I gave Kyle that never came back. It wasn't just favoritism. It was theft. I met Robert the next morning in a small brick-walled office in Cambridge that smelled like old paper and lemon polish. He didn't look like a shark. He looked like a math teacher wearing a sweater vest and thick glasses, but when he looked at the documents David had found, his expression turned terrifyingly blank. "This is messy," he said. He tapped the blue envelope with a pen. "Your grandmother set this up in '98, amended in 2004. It's an irrevocable trust. That means your parents couldn't just touch it." "They sold the house," I said. "They did." He pulled up a document on his computer, the screen glowing blue in the dim light. "But to do that, they had to bypass the trustee. You. That's where the power of attorney comes in." He spun the monitor around. There it was. A document dated March 2015, claiming that due to severe psychological distress and inability to manage affairs, Sarah Vance granted full financial control to her parents, Linda and Mark Vance. I was working 2 jobs then. There was a signature at the bottom that looked like mine, but the loop of the S was wrong. "It's a forgery," Robert said, stating the obvious. "But it's a good one, notarized too." "How?" "Notaries can be bought or tricked." He leaned back, lacing his fingers together. "Here's the kicker, Sarah. It wasn't just the house. The trust had a cash account, about $200,000 in bonds meant for your education and upkeep." I felt the air leave the room. 200,000. I had spent my 20s eating ramen and skipping dentist appointments. I still had a chipped tooth. I had taken out predatory loans for my degree. I had begged them for help when my car broke down in 2016, and they had told me I needed to learn fiscal responsibility. "Where is it?" I asked. "Gone," Robert said simply. "Drained between 2015 and 2018. Mostly transferred to an LLC called Vance Ventures." "Kyle," I whispered. "Your brother?" "Yeah." Robert nodded, making a note on a yellow legal pad. "So, here's the situation. We have proof of fraud, embezzlement, and forgery. You could go to the police right now. They'd be arrested by dinner." I stared at the rain streaking the window. Arrested. My parents in handcuffs. Kyle crying in a holding cell. It would be loud. It would be messy. Everyone in our small town would know, and my parents would play the victims. The confused elderly couple attacked by their ungrateful, crazy daughter. They already had the paperwork to prove I was unstable, right? "No," I said. Robert raised an eyebrow. "No?" "If I go to the police now, they'll claim I authorized it during a lucid moment. They'll drag it out. They'll spend whatever is left of the house money on lawyers." I looked at him. "I want the money back. All of it. And I want them to admit it." "That's a tall order." "Can we freeze the proceeds from the house sale?" "If we file an emergency injunction, yes. But they'll know you're onto them immediately." "Do it," I said. "But don't serve them yet. Let the bank freeze the account first. I need a few days." "Why?" "Because it's my dad's birthday on Sunday," I said, standing up. "And I have a role to play." The drive back was a blur. I felt different, heavier but sharper, like a weapon that had finally been taken out of its sheath. I spent the next 2 days working my shifts at the library, smiling at patrons, stamping books, while inside I was running calculations. Sunday arrived. I wore a dress my mother had bought me years ago, one I hated because the collar was too tight, and drove to the Italian restaurant. The air in the place was thick with garlic and forced laughter. I almost gagged. There they were, sitting at the best booth in the corner. My dad looking flushed and happy, my mom fussing with her napkin, and Kyle. Kyle was wearing a suit, a nice suit, silk tie, and on his wrist, a watch that probably cost more than my car. "Sarah," my mom chirped, waving me over. "You're late. We almost ordered appetizers without you." "Sorry," I said, sliding into the booth next to Kyle. "Traffic." "Always excuses," my dad joked, but there was no bite in it today. He was in a good mood. Why wouldn't he be? He had just cashed a check for $500,000. "Happy birthday, Dad," I said, handing him a card. "I hadn't put any money in it. Just a heartfelt message about honesty. I wondered if he'd catch the irony. So, Kyle said, leaning back and signaling the waiter with a snap of his fingers. Big news, sis. I'm finally expanding the business, opening a second location for the gym. Kyle's gym was a rented warehouse that had never turned a profit. That's amazing, I said, my voice steady. Where did you get the capital? Banks are tight right now. The table went quiet, just for a second. My mom exchanged a quick, panicked glance with my dad. My dad cleared his throat, reaching for his wine. Investors, Kyle said quickly. Private investors. They see the potential. We're just so proud of him, my mom added, her voice a little too high, a little too shrill. He's really turning things around, unlike some people who are still renting that awful apartment. She looked at me, pityingly. Actually, I said, picking up my menu, I was thinking of moving, maybe buying a place. I drove by the old house the other day. Clink. My dad's fork hit his plate. You did? He asked. Yeah, saw a moving truck. Did the new neighbors move in? My mother froze. She looked like a deer in headlights, or maybe a thief caught with her hand in the register. Oh, honey, we didn't want to worry you. We decided to rent it out, to a nice family. It was just too big for us. Rent it out? I asked, feigning confusion. I thought I saw a sold sign. You must be mistaken, my dad said, his voice hardening. It's a rental. We're managing it. Income property. Helps with retirement. The lie was smooth, practiced. They had looked me in the eye and erased my heritage. They were sitting on a pile of cash stolen from my future, buying calamari and expensive watches while lying to my face. That makes sense, I said. Smart move. I watched Kyle check his watch. He looked bored. He didn't know about the house, I realized, not the details. He just knew the bank of mom and dad was open again. He was a parasite, but they were the hosts who kept feeding him. So, I said, since you're doing so well with the rental, maybe we could talk about that loan for my car? The transmission is slipping again. My mom sighed, a long, dramatic exhale. Sarah, really? Tonight? On your father's birthday? You know we don't have liquid cash right now. The market is volatile. Right, I said. Volatile. My phone buzzed in my purse. It was a text from Robert. Injunction granted. Accounts frozen as of 5 p.m. today. Bank of America, Chase in the investment portfolio. It's done. I looked at the time. 6:30 p.m. They didn't know yet. The cards in their wallets were now useless pieces of plastic. The checks they had written for this dinner were going to bounce. The investors Kyle was bragging about were about to dry up. Is everything okay? Kyle asked, eyeing my phone. Yeah, I said, smiling for real for the first time that night. Just a work thing. Everything is finally balancing out? Boring, Kyle muttered. Let's order, my dad boomed. Get the steak, Kyle. On me. I watched my father grin, the picture of a benevolent patriarch. I ordered the soup. I wanted to be watching when the waiter came back with the declined credit card. But wait! That would be too public, too messy, and Robert had warned me to be careful. If they found out tonight, the screaming would start here. I wasn't ready for the screaming. I needed them to find out when they were alone, when they had nowhere to hide. So I waited. I ate my soup. I listened to them brag. I let them dig the hole deeper and deeper, shoveling dirt over their own heads with every lie they told. I'll get the check, I said suddenly when the bill came. You? Kyle laughed. With what money? My treat, I insisted. For Dad. My parents looked relieved, pathetically relieved. They saved $80 and I bought myself another 24 hours of silence. Thanks, sweetie, my mom said, patting my hand. Maybe things are turning around for you. You have no idea, I said. I paid the bill. I walked them to their cars. I hugged them goodbye, feeling their bodies stiffen slightly, as if they could sense the danger radiating off me. As I drove away, I saw my dad pull out his phone, probably checking his balance. I didn't stick around to see the color drain from his face. I had a meeting with Robert in the morning to discuss the next phase, the forensic audit. because if they thought freezing the accounts was bad, they weren't going to survive what I found in the tax returns. The phone call came at 7:14 a.m. I was awake, staring at the ceiling, drinking coffee that was too strong and listening to the rain tap against the window pane. I hadn't slept much. When my phone vibrated on the nightstand, buzzing like an angry insect, I knew exactly who it was without looking. "Sarah!" My mother's voice was a jagged tear of panic. "Sarah, you have to help us! We've been hacked!" I took a sip of coffee. "Calm down, Mom. What happened?" "Everything is gone. We went to get gas this morning. Your father has a golf game, and the card was declined, so we called the bank, and they said the accounts are frozen." She was hyperventilating now. "They said it's a legal hold. Someone stole our identity, Sarah. Probably those hackers from Russia you hear about on the news." "That sounds serious," I said. "It is serious. We can't access a dime. Not the checking, not the savings. Kyle's account is locked too because we're co-signers." "Kyle must be upset." "He's frantic! He has vendors to pay!" I closed my eyes, picturing Kyle's vendors. Probably a bookie or a car lease payment he couldn't afford. "Okay, Mom, take a breath. Have you called a lawyer?" "We can't afford a lawyer if we can't access our money," she shrieked. "We need you to lend us a retainer, just $5,000, until we get this sorted." $5,000. That was exactly the amount I had in my savings account. It took me 3 years to save it. "I don't have that kind of cash, Mom," I lied. "But listen, I know a guy. He's a forensic accountant. He helped a friend of mine with an identity theft case last year. Maybe he can look at it pro bono, or at least tell you what's happening." "Really? Oh, thank God. Is he good?" "He's the best," I said. "His name is Robert. I'll text you the address. Meet us there at noon." "We'll be there. Thank you, Sarah. You're a lifesaver." I hung up. My hand was shaking, but not from fear. It was adrenaline. I was leading them right into the lion's den, and they were thanking me for it. I got to Robert's office an hour early. He had the audit spread out on his desk like a war map. The paper trail was dense, winding through 3 different banks and a shell company, but Robert had cut through the noise. He looked tired. "It's worse than we thought," he said, skipping the pleasantries. "How much worse?" "The house sale was just the finale. They've been bleeding you dry for a decade." He pushed a stack of papers toward me. "Recognize this?" It was a withdrawal slip from 2012. Tuition reimbursement. $15,000. "I paid my own tuition," I said, my voice flat. "I'm still paying the loans." "Exactly. They withdrew money from the trust claiming they were paying your university. They pocketed it." Robert flipped the page. "And this? This is the big one." He pointed to a check copy dated February 2015. "Pay to the order of Dr. Eris Thorne. Amount, $7,500. "Who is Dr. Thorne?" I asked. "He's a psychiatrist," Robert said. He lost his license in 2017 for overprescribing opioids, but back in 2015, he was still practicing. And get this, he's the one who signed the affidavit stating you were mentally incompetent. The room spun. I grabbed the edge of the desk. "They paid him?" "Looks like it. A consulting fee. 2 days later, he signs a document saying you have acute paranoid delusions and inability to manage financial realities. That document is what they used to get power of attorney without a court hearing." I felt sick, physically sick. I remembered 2015. I had been depressed, who wouldn't be, working 2 minimum wage jobs while my brother drove a BMW, but I wasn't delusional. I had gone to my parents for help. I had cried at their kitchen table, telling them I felt overwhelmed. They hadn't comforted me. They had recorded me, or at least they had taken notes. And then they had taken those notes to a dirty doctor and bought a diagnosis that stripped me of my rights. "They bought me," I whispered. "They bought my sanity for $7,500. "It's fraud, Sarah. It's malpractice. It's criminal conspiracy." Robert took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "When they walk in here today, we have them cold. We can offer them a choice. Sign over everything remaining and repay the rest, or we call the district attorney." "No," I said. Robert looked up. "No? If we corner them today, they'll panic. They'll deny it. My dad has a heart condition, or he claims to. He'll fake a chest pain, an ambulance will come, and the sympathy clock resets." I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the busy street. "I need them to admit it," I said. "On tape. I need them to say it to my face when they think they're safe." "How?" "We don't tell them you're investigating them," I said, turning back to him. "We tell them you found the hacker. We tell them the bank froze the accounts because of suspicious activity linked to the trust." Robert's eyes narrowed. "And then?" "And then we tell them the only way to unlock the money is for the beneficiary, me, to sign a waiver in person, validating the past transactions." "You want to bait them into asking you to sign off on your own theft?" "Exactly. That's risky." "It's the only way to get the truth," I said. "They have to ask me to do it. They have to look me in the eye and ask me to sign away my life again." Robert stared at me for a long moment. Then a slow, grim smile spread across his face. "You're scary, Sarah." I learned from the best. At noon, the door opened. My parents walked in, looking like they had aged 10 years since the Italian dinner. My dad was pale, sweating in his golf shirt. My mom was clutching her purse so hard her knuckles were white. Kyle was trailing behind them, looking annoyed rather than worried, texting on his phone. "Sarah!" My mom rushed to hug me, but I stepped back, pretending to look for a chair. She hugged the air. "This is Robert," I said. "He's the forensic accountant." "Thank you for seeing us," my dad said, his voice shaking. "This has been a nightmare. Total nightmare." "Have a seat," Robert said, his voice professional and detached. He didn't offer them coffee. "I've looked at the freezing order," Robert lied smoothly. "It seems the bank's fraud algorithm flagged a discrepancy in the original trust deed from 1998 versus the withdrawals made in 2015. My dad stiffened. "Discrepancy?" "Yes. It appears the system doesn't recognize the power of attorney document on file. It thinks the beneficiary, Sarah, didn't authorize the liquidation of the assets." The room went dead silent. Kyle looked up from his phone. "So fix it." "I can't," Robert said. "The bank requires a confirmation of knowledge. Basically, Sarah needs to sign a document stating she was aware of every transaction and approves them retroactively. Once she signs, the freeze lifts instantly." My mother let out a breath she must have been holding for hours. "Oh, is that all?" She turned to me, her eyes wide and pleading. The same look she used when she wanted me to babysit Kyle's dog for free. "Sarah, honey," she said, "you'll sign it, right? It's just a formality. We need to pay the bills." "I don't know," I said, looking down at my hands. "Robert said the withdrawals were substantial. Hundreds of thousands. I didn't know about that money." "It was for the family," my dad said quickly. "We used it for investments. For your future." "But I never saw it," I said. "You were unwell," my mom said, dropping her voice to a stage whisper. "Remember 2015? You were struggling. We took care of it for you." "By selling the house?" I asked. They froze. "We didn't sell the house," my dad said, a bead of sweat rolling down his temple. "We told you, we're renting it." "Right," I said. "Renting." I looked at Robert. He gave me a barely perceptible nod. The recording device in his drawer was rolling. "Okay," I said. "I'll sign." My parents slumped with relief. Kyle scoffed. "Finally!" "But," I added, "I need to read the list of transactions first. I can't sign a blanket waiver. Robert, can you print the ledger?" "Of course," Robert said. He hit a key. The printer whirred. He handed the stack of papers to my father, not me. "Take a look," Robert said, "just to verify." My dad looked at the top page. His face went gray. It wasn't the transaction list. It was the invoice from Dr. Eris Thorne. And underneath it, a copy of the deed transfer to David, with my forged signature highlighted in neon yellow. "What is this?" my dad whispered. That, I said, leaning forward, is the reason I'm not signing anything. The trap snapped shut. The silence in that room was heavy enough to crush a lung. My father held the paper like it was radioactive, his face cycling through a spectrum of red that would have worried a cardiologist, if he actually had a heart. My mother, usually the master of spin, just stared at the highlighted signature, her mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock. Kyle broke the silence. So? He scoffed, throwing his hands up. So what? It's a piece of paper. Mom and Dad handled your affairs because you were a mess, Sarah. You should be thanking them. A mess? I asked softly. You were depressed. My mother jumped in, latching onto the narrative like a lifeline. You were unstable, honey. We did it for your own good. That house, it was too much responsibility. We were protecting you. By selling it and keeping the money? I asked. We invested it, my dad shouted, slamming the paper onto Robert's desk. We invested it in the family business, in Kyle's gym, in the market. It's all tied up right now, but it's there. Robert didn't blink. He reached into a folder and pulled out another sheet. Actually, Mr. Vance, it's not tied up. It's gone. According to these bank statements from 2016 through 2018, the funds were used for a lease on a 2017 Porsche Cayenne, a membership at Cypress Point Country Club, and approximately $40,000 in online gambling debts. Kyle shifted in his seat. That's private, Kyle muttered. Not when it's paid for with stolen funds, Robert said, his voice dropping an octave. And let's be clear about the terminology here. This isn't handling affairs. This is grand larceny, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit fraud. My mother let out a strangled sob, real tears this time. She was terrified. You can't do this to us, she wailed, turning to me. We're your parents. We raised you. We paid for your braces. How can you sit there and let this stranger threaten us? I'm not threatening you, I said. I'm just listening. Sarah, please, she begged, reaching for my hand across the desk. I pulled back. We didn't mean any harm. We were going to pay it back. Once Kyle's gym took off, we were going to give you a share, a big share. The gym has been operating at a loss for 3 years, Robert interjected, and the second location doesn't exist. I checked the permits. There's nothing. Kyle stood up. He was big, used to physically dominating spaces, and he glared at Robert with the dull aggression of a man who's never been told no. Watch your mouth, Kyle spat. You don't know anything about business. Sit down, I said. It wasn't a shout. It was a command. Kyle looked at me shocked. I had never spoken to him like that. Ever. I was the quiet sister, the doormat, the one who folded so they didn't have to bend. But the Sarah they knew was gone, burned away by the truth in that blue envelope. Sit down, Kyle, I repeated, or Robert calls the district attorney right now. Kyle sat. Here's the reality, I said, looking at my parents. You sold my house for $350,000. You drained the trust of another $200,000. That's over $500,000 that belonged to me, legally. We're family, my dad sputtered. Money is fluid in a family. Not this money, I said. This money was a specific bequest from Grandma. She knew you'd do this. That's why she put it in a trust. You had to declare me insane to get it. We didn't say insane, my mom whispered. You paid a doctor to say I was delusional, I corrected her. Dr. Thorne, Robert has the check. He was a professional opinion, my dad insisted, though his voice was losing its steam. He was a drug dealer with a medical license, Robert said. And since he's already in prison, I'm sure he'd be happy to cut a deal and testify that you bribed him. It would knock a few years off his sentence. My dad slumped back in his chair. The fight went out of him all at once. He looked old. What do you want, Sarah? He asked. You want to send us to jail? Is that it? You want to see your mother in handcuffs? I want my future back, I said. We don't have the money, Kyle yelled. It's gone. What part of that don't you get? I know it's gone, I said. But you have assets. The room went quiet again. My parents exchanged a look of pure horror. They knew exactly what I was talking about. Their house, the one they lived in, the one with the manicured lawn and the heated driveway. "You can't," my mom whispered. "That's our home." "Like the one you sold out from under me?" I asked. "The one Grandma built?" "That was different," she cried. "You were single. You didn't need all that space. We have standing in the community." "And I have a forensic audit," I said. I looked at Robert. He slid a thick document across the desk toward them. It wasn't an audit this time. It was a settlement agreement. "Option A," Robert said, sounding bored. "I hand this file to the DA. The fraud charges alone carry a minimum of 5 years. The forgery adds another 2. And the IRS, they'll be very interested in the unreported income from the house sale." My dad flinched. "Option B," I said. "You sign this." My dad picked up the document, his hands shaking so hard the paper rattled. He read the first page, then the second. This says we transfer the deed to our house to you," he choked out. "And the cars," I added, "and Kyle's business assets, whatever is left of them." "You're leaving us with nothing," Kyle said, his voice quiet for the first time. "I'm leaving you with exactly what you left me," I said. "Actually, I'm being generous. I'm not pressing charges. I'm letting you keep your freedom. That's more than you gave me when you paid Dr. Thorne." "I can't sign this," my dad said. It's humiliation." "Then go to jail," Robert said. He reached for the phone on his desk. He picked up the receiver. "I have the number for the Economic Crimes Division right here." My dad looked at my mom. She was weeping silently, her mascara running down her face in dark, jagged lines. She nodded. Just once. "Don't do it, Dad," Kyle said. "She's bluffing." "She's not bluffing," my dad said. He knew. He looked at me and saw the stranger in his daughter's skin. "Pen," my dad said. Robert handed him a pen. My dad signed. Then he pushed it to my mom. She signed, sobbing the whole time. Then they looked at Kyle. "I'm not signing anything," Kyle said. "You are," I said. "Or I report the gambling debts as income you didn't declare. And the investors you defrauded, I'm sure they'd love to know where their money really went." Kyle glared at me with pure hate. I didn't care. He grabbed the pen and scribbled his name. "Get out," I said. "Sarah," my mom started. "Get out!" They stood up. Shuffling, broken, they walked to the door. My dad paused at the threshold, looking back at me with a mix of confusion and fear. "We're your family," he said. "No," I said, picking up the signed deed. "You're my debtors, and we're finally square." The door clicked shut. I sat there in the silence, listening to the rain. I thought I would feel triumphant. I thought I would feel happy. But mostly, I just felt tired. "You okay?" Robert asked. "I think so," I said. "You know," he said, stacking the papers, "getting the house is one thing, evicting them is another. They're not going to leave quietly." "I know," I said, "but I'm not going to evict them." Robert paused. "You're not?" "No," I said. "That would be too easy." I looked at the deed in my hand. "I'm going to become their landlord." Owning your parents' house isn't the victory lap you'd expect. It's quiet, heavy, and smells like ozone and impending rain. I didn't kick them out that day in Robert's office, and I didn't scream, because screaming is for people who don't have leverage. Instead, I had Robert draft a standard ironclad residential lease agreement, the kind property management companies use to evict hoarders and frat boys. 40 pages long. It was impersonal. It was cold. It was perfect. So, a week later, I pulled into the driveway of the house I now owned. It was November 2019. The air was biting, the sky a flat, slate gray that threatened snow, and the house looked exactly the same as it always had. Pristine, imposing, and completely fake. My mother had planted mums in the planters by the door. I noted that. Landscaping improvements belonged to the landlord upon termination of the lease. I rang the bell. I didn't use my key, even though I had one now. Because boundaries are a muscle, and I was exercising mine. My dad answered. He looked thinner. The arrogance that used to puff out his chest like a rooster was gone, replaced by a nervous twitch in his left eye. "Sarah," he said, not stepping aside, "we didn't think you'd actually come." "It's the first of the month," I said, holding up a manila folder. "Rent is due." He stared at me, his mouth working silently, as if the concept of paying me to live in the house he built was a language he couldn't speak. Then he stepped back. The living room was warm. My mom was sitting on the sofa, clutching a throw pillow like a shield, and Kyle was nowhere to be seen, which usually meant he was hiding or plotting. "Let's sit," I said. I laid the lease on the coffee table. "This is a standard 12-month agreement," I explained, keeping my voice level, the way you talk to a skittish dog. "Rent is set at market rate for a 4-bedroom in this zip code. That's $2,800 a month." My mom gasped. "2,000? Sarah, that's extortion. We're on a fixed income." "You have Social Security," I said. "And Dad has his pension, and you don't have a mortgage anymore, remember? I own the equity." "But we have bills," she cried. "So do I," said. "And unlike you, I don't steal to pay them." Silence. It was heavy and thick, the kind of silence that suffocates you. I loved it. "There are rules," I continued, flipping to page 6. "No unauthorized alterations to the property, no subletting, and strict adherence to occupancy limits." "Occupancy limits?" my dad asked, squinting at the paper. "2 adults," I said. "That's you and Mom." "What about Kyle?" "Kyle is 27, I said. "He's not a minor. If he lives here, he needs to be on the lease as a tenant, and the rent goes up by $500 for additional wear and tear." "He's your brother!" my mom shrieked, standing up. "He's trying to get his business off the ground. He can't afford rent." "Then he can't afford to live here." "You're being cruel," she spat. "You're enjoying this." "I'm protecting my asset," I said, meeting her eyes. "You taught me that, remember? When you sold Grandma's house because it was too much responsibility for me, I'm just managing my portfolio." I uncapped a pen. "Sign here and here. Initial the lead paint disclosure." They signed. They didn't have a choice, really. The alternative was eviction, and in a small town, an eviction notice with your daughter's name on it is a social death sentence. "Where's the check?" I asked. My dad pulled a checkbook out of his shirt pocket. His hands shook so badly he could barely write the date. He handed it to me. "Mark and Linda Vance, $2,800. "Thank you," I said, tucking it into my folder. "I'll be back in 3 months for the quarterly inspection. Please ensure the gutters are cleaned before the first snow. Ice dams cause roof damage, and that would come out of your security deposit." I walked out. I didn't slam the door. I closed it gently until it clicked. But wait. The real test wasn't the signing. The real test came 3 weeks later, right around Thanksgiving. I got a text from a neighbor, Mrs. Gable, who had always liked me better than Kyle. "Hi, Sarah. Just wanted to let you know. Looks like there's a lot of construction noise coming from your parents' garage. Hope they're doing okay." Construction. I hadn't authorized any construction. I drove over immediately. It was 7 p.m. on a Tuesday. The garage door was closed, but I could hear the high-pitched whine of a power saw and the thud of heavy machinery. I parked on the street, not the driveway, and walked up the side path. I punched in the code for the garage keypad. They hadn't changed it. The door rolled up. The garage, which was supposed to house my father's sedan, had been transformed. The car was parked on the lawn, a lease violation, and the space was filled with weight benches, squat racks, and mirrors. Kyle was there, spotting a guy I didn't know who was bench pressing enough weight to crush a rib cage. "Bro, one more!" Kyle yelled. The door stopped rolling. The noise of the street flooded in. Kyle spun around. He was wearing a tank top with his gym logo on it. When he saw me, his face went from pumped-up aggression to pure, unadulterated panic. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Sarah," he stammered, stepping in front of the weight bench. We were just working out." "This is a commercial enterprise," I said, looking at the stranger on the bench. "Are you paying him?" The guy sat up, wiping sweat off his forehead. "Yeah, $50 a session." Who are you? I'm the landlord, I said. And you're trespassing. Get out, Kyle hissed at me. This is my house. No, I said, pulling out my phone. It's mine, and you're running an unlicensed business on residential property. That voids the homeowner's insurance policy. Mom said it was okay, Kyle shouted, his veins popping. She said I could use the space until the new location opens. Mom doesn't own the garage, Kyle. I took a photo. Flash on. Kyle lunged. It happened fast, but also in slow motion. He didn't hit me. He wasn't that stupid, but he grabbed my phone, wrenching it out of my hand. Delete it! He screamed, spit flying. Delete it right now, or I swear to God! Kyle! My dad was standing in the doorway connecting the garage to the house. He was wearing his bathrobe. He looked terrified. Give her the phone, my dad said. She's trying to ruin me, Kyle yelled, waving the phone like a weapon. She's jealous. She's always been jealous because I'm the one with potential. Potential? I laughed. It was a dark, sharp sound. Kyle, you're 27. You live with your parents and you just assaulted your landlord. I didn't hit you. You took my property by force. That's robbery. And since the phone is worth over $1,000, it's a felony. I held out my hand. Give it back, and maybe I won't call the cops. Kyle looked at the phone. He looked at me. Then he looked at the guy on the bench who was hurriedly putting on his hoodie and backing away. You're crazy, Kyle muttered. He threw the phone. It hit the concrete floor. Crack! The screen shattered into a spider web of glass. I looked down at the broken phone. Then I looked at my father. That's a lease violation, I said softly. Criminal activity on the premises and destruction of property. Sarah, please, my dad begged. He's upset. He didn't mean it. He never means it, I said, picking up the phone. It still worked. I could see the glow of the screen through the cracks. But he always does it. I turned to Kyle. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises, I said. If you're here tomorrow night, I'm filing for an emergency eviction order based on safety concerns, and I'll attach the police report for the phone. You wouldn't, Kyle sneered. Mom won't let you. Mom signed the lease, I said. She's liable for your actions. If you don't leave, I evict them too. That stopped him. For the first time in his life, his actions had consequences that ricocheted onto the people who protected him. He looked at Dad. Dad didn't look back. He was staring at the floor, defeated. Get out, Kyle, my dad whispered. What? Get out, Dad said, louder this time. She owns the house, son. She owns everything. I walked back to my car. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from clarity. I drove to the nearest Verizon store to get a new phone. While I waited for the data to transfer, I checked my bank account. The rent check had cleared. I used their money to buy the new phone. And honestly, it was the best purchase I ever made. December 2019 didn't feel like any Christmas I'd ever known. Usually, the holidays were a suffocating performance of Happy Family, starring my mother as the frantic director and me as the prop who didn't smile enough. I hated it. But this year, the script had been rewritten. I wasn't the daughter coming home to beg for approval. I was the landlord coming to check the pipes. I pulled up to the house on Christmas Eve, not with gifts, but with a salt bucket for the walkway. The lease clearly stated that snow removal was the tenant's responsibility, but the forecast called for ice, and I didn't want a slip-and-fall lawsuit on my insurance. My dad was outside. He was shoveling. He looked older than he had in October, smaller. He was wearing a coat I recognized, one he'd bought 5 years ago, and using a plastic shovel that looked like it was about to snap. When he saw my car, he stopped. He didn't wave. He just leaned on the shovel, catching his breath, watching me get out. Afternoon, I said. Sarah? He nodded. We weren't expecting you. Just checking the gutters, I said, pointing up at the roofline. Forecast says heavy ice. He looked at the roof. Then he looked at his boots. Kyle's not here, he said. I know, I said. He's at work. It was the first time in 27 years that sentence had been true. And honestly, I checked. Kyle had gotten a job at a distribution center 3 towns over. It was night shift, minimum wage, and brutal work. He was living in a studio apartment above a garage that I didn't own, paying his own rent because he had no other choice. "He's exhausted," my dad said, a hint of the old accusation creeping into his voice. "He calls your mother crying sometimes, says his back hurts." "Work does that," I said. "He'll get used to it." My dad sighed. He looked at the house, my house, with a longing that was almost painful to watch. "We miss having everyone here. For the holidays. Your mother, she made a roast." "That's nice," I said. "You could stay," he offered. "Just for dinner. We could put this behind us." I looked at him. I looked at the house where they had plotted to steal my future. I looked at the window of the office where they had signed the papers declaring me incompetent. I looked at the driveway where David, the stranger, had saved my life with a blue envelope. "No," I said. "I can't." "Why not?" "Because I have plans," I lied. I didn't. "And because the rent is due on the 1st. Don't be late." It was cold. I turned back to my car, leaving him standing in the snow, a man who had traded his daughter's trust for a lie and lost both. I didn't go to a party that night. I went to my apartment. It was small and the heating rattled, but it was mine. I sat on the floor, surrounded by takeout containers and a cheap bottle of wine, and I pulled out a notebook. The ledger. On one side, I had written down everything they took: the money, the house, the years of gaslighting, the self-doubt that had crippled me for a decade. On the other side, I wrote down what I had now. Ownership of the property, secured. Kyle's free ride, terminated. My debt, paid off. See, that was the thing nobody tells you about revenge. It's not about watching them suffer, though watching Kyle actually work for a living was deeply satisfying. It's about the math. It's about balancing the equation until the red ink turns black. I had used the first 2 rent checks to pay off the last of my student loans. For the first time in my adult life, I was debt-free. I had a credit score that was climbing. I had a job at the library that I loved, and now I had a passive income stream that would eventually fund my own home, one they would never set foot in. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Mom. "Merry Christmas, Sarah. We miss you. Please think about coming over tomorrow. Dad is really down." I stared at the screen. A year ago, that text would have crushed me. I would have felt guilty. I would have driven over there, apologized for things I didn't do, and let them chip away at my soul for another 12 months. But I wasn't that Sarah anymore. That Sarah had been incapacitated. That Sarah had been a victim. I typed back, "Merry Christmas. I'll see you on the 1st for the check." I blocked the number for the rest of the night. Then I poured a glass of wine and toasted the empty room. The house on the hill was still there, standing tall against the Vermont winter. Inside, my parents were probably sitting in silence, surrounded by the ghosts of their own greed. They had their house, technically. They had their furniture. But they didn't have the deed, and they didn't have me. They were tenants in a life they used to own. And me? I was finally completely free. I took a sip of wine. It tasted like grapes and oak. It tasted like the truth.